You know, if you're watching this right now, you're using JavaScript. Seriously. It's the invisible engine that makes pretty much everything on the modern web tick. From your social media feed to the buttons you click on. That's all JavaScript. It's one of the 3 foundational languages of the web, right alongside HTML and CSS. And when I say it's everywhere, I am not kidding. A staggering 99% of all websites use JavaScript. Think about that for a second. That kind of dominance is almost unheard of in the tech world. It is, for all intents and purposes, the native language of the web. So that brings up a really interesting question, doesn't it? If basically every web developer on the planet uses the same language, why on earth is the community split between dozens of different tools and frameworks, like React or Angular or Vue? Well, let's get into it, because the answer to that question is really the story of the web itself. To really get why we have this world of frameworks, we need to rewind. We have to go back to the beginning and understand the original problem that JavaScript was created to solve. Back in the early 90s, the web was, well, it was a pretty quiet place. A web page was basically just a digital document. Once it loaded, that was it. It just sat there. It couldn't change, it couldn't react to you, it was static. And there was this growing feeling that, we could do more. We needed to bring these pages to life. And this was the answer. In 1995, a developer at Netscape named Brendan Each was given a mission. And in what is now a legendary story, he created the first version of JavaScript in just 10 days. 10! Its whole purpose was simple: give developers a way to make websites interactive. But JavaScript's success almost immediately created a brand new and, frankly, massive problem. Its invention kicked off what we now call the browser wars, a super chaotic time that nearly broke the web before it ever really got going. Okay, so as soon as Netscape had this cool new scripting language, its biggest rival, Microsoft, knew they needed to have an answer for their browser Internet Explorer. So what did they do? They basically reverse-engineered JavaScript and released their own, slightly incompatible version, and they called it JScript. And right there, that was the beginning of a huge headache for developers everywhere. For years, if you were a developer, you had to write your code twice, or at least write a bunch of annoying checks to see if it would work on Netscape's JavaScript and Microsoft's JScript. They just behaved differently. Things got so messy that to stop the web from just completely splintering apart, the language was submitted for standardization. That gave us something called ECMAScript in 1997. But honestly, the damage was kind of already done. See, by the early 2000s, Microsoft had pretty much won the browser wars. Internet Explorer had a mind-blowing 95% of the market. And because of that, its version of JavaScript, JScript, became the standard in practice even if it wasn't the official one. This huge monopoly actually slowed down web innovation for years because, well, Microsoft had no real reason to play nice and follow the rules. So, for developers, life was just a nightmare of browser checks and workarounds. But as often happens, out of all that chaos, the open source community started building the tools that would ultimately save JavaScript from itself. The first really big game changer wasn't a tool, but a technique. It was called Ajax. And the idea was revolutionary. It let JavaScript talk to a server in the background after the page had already loaded. This meant you could update a small part of a page, like new messages loading in a chat, without that awful, clunky full-page refresh. This one concept made websites feel fast and responsive, almost like desktop apps. And that amazing Ajax technique was made easy for everyone by a new generation of JavaScript tools called libraries. The king of them all was jQuery. Its motto was perfect: do more, write less. jQuery gave developers one simple way to do really complex things, like animations or Ajax calls. But crucially, it papered over all those painful differences between the browsers. It did all the dirty work for you. So libraries like jQuery were awesome for spicing up web pages. But then, the very idea of a website started to shift. They weren't just documents with some cool effects anymore. No, they were becoming massive, complex applications that just happened to run inside a web browser. And that shift created the next big problem. I mean, how do you build and maintain something as huge and complicated as, say, Gmail or Google Maps, using tools that were designed for much simpler jobs? It was becoming clear that you needed more than just a toolbox. You needed a system. You needed a blueprint. And this is the key distinction to understand. A library like jQuery is like a well-stocked workshop. You've got all these powerful tools, and you, the builder, decide when to pick up a saw or a hammer. You're in control. A framework is different. A framework isn't the toolbox, it's the architectural blueprint for the entire house. It tells you where the walls go, where the plumbing runs. It provides the structure so you can focus on building, knowing the foundation is solid. This fundamental need for structure is what led to the modern frameworks we know today. Eventually, three major players emerged. We have React, which came out of Facebook, and it's built around this powerful idea of creating interfaces out of reusable components. Then there's Angular from Google, which is more of an all-in-one, highly structured system for really large enterprise-level apps. And finally, Vue, which is a community-driven project that's known for being really flexible and a bit easier to get started with. And that pretty much brings us up to today. But the story is far from over. The JavaScript world is still changing at a dizzying speed, and a whole new set of problems is driving the next wave of tools. Turns out, for all the structure and power they provide, modern frameworks can sometimes make websites slow. They often have to send a ton of JavaScript code down to your phone or computer, which can really bog things down, especially on a bad connection. And so, the cycle starts all over again. The community sees a new problem and starts building new tools to solve it. This new wave of tools, things like Astro or Svelte, are obsessed with one thing: performance. The core idea is to do as much work as possible on the web server before anything even gets to your device. They try to send the absolute minimum amount of JavaScript needed, only adding it for the bits of the page that actually need to be interactive. It's kind of like going back to the web's simpler roots, but with all the lessons we've learned along the way. And this really gets at the core tension of how we build software, right? The story of JavaScript is just this constant cycle. We invent something new, that new thing creates new kinds of complexity, and then we have to invent new tools to manage that complexity. So the big question looking forward is, will that cycle ever end? As the things we build on the web get even bigger and more ambitious, are the blueprints we use to build them going to get simpler or just more and more complex?